Hello, everybody, and welcome back to, uh, well, making sure that you walk with rhythm, because if you don't, well, then you're not going to be here anymore. Anyway, book two of the Houses of Dune prequel trilogy by Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson, House Harkonnen. Um, so like the last book, it is an ensemble piece, very like Game of Thrones. There's multiple characters, multiple plot threads, but the most focus we get is mostly on the Harkonnens, and of course, Paul, or not Paul, Leto's still in it because Leto is very important to this prequel trilogy. But the thing that we basically get almost none of, like we get passingly, but not as much as the last book, we get basically very little of Shaddam and all the stuff focusing on House Crino. But I'm assuming that will be different moving forward because the next book, of course, is titled House Crino. So while all books are an ensemble cast, the way I think it works, each house book, it's still going to focus on all the different characters, but they're going to be the center focus. So first book was mostly just on Leto and his family and everything, and Harkonnens were there and Shaddam was there, but it was the main story was about Leto. And then this story, there's a lot going on with the Harkonnens. There's a lot going on with Leto, and then we passingly get to see other characters here and there, but it's the main focus is the Harkonnens, and then I imagine book three will be the center focus on the Carino family. So there's that. Um, we get to see a lot of the evils, of House Harkonnen before the events of the original Dune novel, which kind of helps you just further wish for their downfall. Um, and we get a lot with Leto as well, and introducing a lot of things that need to be set up for the original trilogy or for the original novel. I'm sorry, to make sense. And you know, one thing I have to say for a book that's written much simpler, um, this book felt rather slow. I, but this happens a lot with second books in a trilogy or whatever. Like, it drags a lot. There's also a lot of parts I feel that are blatantly unnecessary. Um, Gurney Gurney's stuff was cool. Gurney gets introduced in this book. Gurney Halleck, and he wasn't in the last book, so it was cool to see his origins, and I really enjoyed his parts. We get to see what makes him hate the Harkonnen so much, because that's something they all have in common, right? The thing that Gurney Halleck and Duncan Idaho have in common is that they love Leto Atreides. They would die for Leto Atreides, and they hate the Harkonnens. We get the origins of both of their hatred, in these books, which is cool. At the same time, Duncan decides he needs to be the best protector he can possibly be, for Leto. So he goes to learn at the Gana school, which cool, right? Cool, great, because we know he's a cool swordsman. Because if you've read the original book or watched the newest movie, he can fight. He's a really good fighter. But did we need to see him in school learning all this stuff? There's some interesting tidbits here and there, but it's stuff that didn't really need to be there. Outside of like if you're the biggest Duncan Idaho fan, you're gonna have the time of your life. Because here's more. Say what you will, Frank Herbert probably would have enjoyed it since he can't seem to let Duncan go. I haven't read everything yet, but I know that Duncan always finds a way to return in his stories. So you know, but yeah, we get more of him here. It just seemed rather unnecessary. Like, it didn't really add that much. I already knew he's going to become this great fighter. I didn't need to see like every second of his training. But um, and then the Gurney Halleck stuff, earlier on we were seeing more of his origins. That was fine. Then he just kind of turns into the Gurney Halleck that you know. So I never found Gurney particularly super interesting. Outside the fact that he likes to like play music, which is always kind of fun. Um, but no, definitely his earlier years in this book were a lot of fun. It's just more when he starts meeting Leto and stuff that it's more of okay. Well, we know where this is going. So um, another thing, like I just maybe other people have gotten really into it, and there's been moments where I was really intrigued, but a lot of the Leah Kynes and Parta Kynes stuff, with like them on Arrakis, I just don't care. I don't know. I just don't feel it. Of course, there's a lot of good moments in there too, where it builds up that relationship between the two of them because that's such a thing when Leah sacrifices himself or her, if we're talking about the movie, the newest one. But it's a he in every other in the books it's a he. Um, but we hear in the book, the original Dune novel, about Leah Kynes and his father and everything that his father meant to him. So I get getting time with them to see stuff, and there's a lot of good character moments there between them. But there's also a lot of like I just the science stuff about the Arrakis and how it's gonna become this paradise one day, and I know it will because I know spoilers because of later stuff. But it's just like I don't know. I don't need all this foreshadowing and stuff to this. I mean, it's cool, I guess, but I don't know. I just feel like the Leah Kynes and part of Kynes section of the book are rather tedious. I don't know. Um, but I rather, and even the Leto stuff in here gets kind of tedious at some points. But when it's really good, it's really good though, in my opinion. Um, and then the Harkonnen stuff. Probably my favorite addition to this is Abelard Harkonnen. Now, knowing someone as someone who's also read the ancient Dune stuff now by them, the like the Butler and Jihad and the Schools of Dune, Abelard Harkonnen, in the in that trilogy, you know, it's crazy because almost every single Harkonnen you see in the ancient past was a good person. The stereotypical the Harkonnens are bad, it didn't exist, not back then. And everybody was kind of a good guy because it was them versus the big bad. But at the end of the last book of the Battle of Corrin is kind of where stuff changes because one of the Atreides, the ancient past, they have to blow up this place, with all the robots on there or whatever. But by doing so, they're going to hurt a lot of people, and or I might be misremembering a bit of pieces of that, but basically, there's an Abelard there, and he's a different Abelard or Conan, but he's like, you shouldn't, we can't, then and Atreides says, you're a betrayer, you don't care about what we need to do, you're a coward, and just blatantly ruins his reputation and name. But the more tragic thing about it with that character is that in the end, even though he harbored a lot of hatred, and he kind of put that on his kids, but near the end of his life, he was willing to make amends. He did not have this he did not have this hatred he didn't want this hatred to last all of his life. He was willing to let bygones be bygones and move on. But his kids weren't. His descendants weren't. And so then become this lifelong 10,000 year feud between the Harkonnens and the Atreides. Anyway, all that to say, we get to this book. We have another Abelard Harkonnen, the half-brother to Vladimir Harkonnen, and the father to the beast Raban. And he is the last, and chronologically in the timeline, unless there's one later down the road with Frank Herbert, I don't know, but the last nice or good Harkonnen. And that's why the Baron hates him so much. It's nice to see it, and he's a really interesting character that they introduced here. And near the end of the book, well, Raban gets his name, the Beast. But I absolutely loved him. He was one of my favorite additions to this book. And then, while the Leto stuff can drag at times, there was some interesting context and changes or stuff that we didn't know about that I was like, this is rather unnecessary. Let's see how this goes. But now having finished the book, I think it was an absolutely wonderful and smart decision to do what they did. I think it adds so much weight to the original book as a prequel series should. And I love it. But I won't get into that until spoilers. But, yeah, it's a mixed bag. I don't think I like this one as much as House Atreides. But it's certainly not bad by any means. And, I mean, this entire trilogy so far, I don't think I enjoy as much as their really, really prequel stuff. Like the stuff that's 10,000 years in the past. I think they got better with time. And they made stuff that was clearly different from Frank Herbert, but also they kind of perfected what they wanted to do and got more ambitious and was willing to do, hey, look, we're so far in the past, we're doing our thing, just set in the Dune universe using Dune things, but this is our thing. We don't have to be beholden to Frank because it's so far in the past. Outside of like a few things that are essential, that must, plot points that must be established, that have been established in other things. But other than that, we have free reign. But here, they're being very safe. Like, a lot of things here are kind of predictable because certain avenues and decisions have to be made to get them into the place they're in by the time of the original book, right? So they're kind of confined in that way. That being said, I still think it was a lot of fun. And people that say this book is bad, it's not. Like, you can say it pales in comparison to Frank Herbert's, and I would absolutely agree with you. But if you go into the right mindset as an expansion to the Dune universe, like you love the Dune universe by Frank Herbert, and you just want more stories set in that world, then these stories are adequate for that. Like, they're not gonna make you see the second coming of Christ, but they're gonna be a fun time to spend part of your day, you know? And sometimes it has really deep and emotional moments that can really hit you, in a way that I don't think Frank ever was really capable of. I mean, I've only read the original Dune novel, but I know he gets more and more and more philosophical as time goes on. And that, I mean, I like that stuff. Like, I love Trader. Um, but it's also nice to, have a more traditional story and have those, like, little personal moments without having to, have this philosophy lesson dumped on you. But I get why people dislike him, but there's a lot of fans who say this is absolute peak garbage. It's not. It's just not Frank Herbert's work. And if you can't read anything that's not Frank Herbert's work, then you won't enjoy it. But if you go into it going, this isn't Frank, this is people writing stuff, so we have more stuff set in this universe, then I think you'll have a good time with it. But that's pretty much it. That's my non-spoiler. A lot of things are set up for the finale. The Talax who finally finished this all artificial spice that they've been making for the Emperor since like several years ago in universe, chronologically. But that's finally being finished up. So we'll see how that gets destroyed by the end of book 3, because it can't be a thing, obviously, because there's no such thing in the original Dune novel. So there must be some way of ending this before then. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, overall, loving these books though. It's still so much fun. But yeah, I'm gonna get into spoilers now. If you don't want spoilers, now's your time to go. And hopefully you all read it though, and give me your opinions and thoughts about it in the comment section below once you get to it. Anyway, let's see. I wrote a couple things down. First thing I wrote was that Link Kynes began this book as a 12-year-old, so there's a major time jump there, because he wasn't 12 in the last book. He was like just born. Gurney in this book starts out younger than me, which is weird, because he starts off as 21, which is just bizarre to think about. Also, I learned because of Fenring that it's been a decade since the last novel, because he says it's been 10 years since. And with the Baron, I've already talked about all this stuff in the last book, and especially now, now that I finished book 2, I really actually think the decision to make Mohim be the one that makes him be the way he is great. Because at this point in time, he's not so obese that he can't like move around without the suit, but he is using a cane to walk around. And I think it does such wonders for this, because, before, yeah, he was fat and he was lazy, but he used to be beautiful. He used to be like, if you were gay, he was one of the hottest guys you've ever seen. Like, he took pride in that. He took pride in his looks, and that has been taken away from him, so which leaves him bitter and angry. I think it adds, to his evil, especially what he did to acquire such wrath from the Bene Gesserit. But, I don't know. As I've read the second book, I really come to appreciate and agree with the decision, because Richard was like, it felt a little unnecessary. Now I'm glad that this happened. I'm really glad they decided to go this route with that. It wasn't unnecessary still, but I'm glad they did it, because I think it adds a lot of context. And Shaddam has been pissed, because he's been emperor since the first book, and he has been pissed at the Bene Gesserit because they refuse, because he got a Bene Gesserit concubine, and they got their own stuff going on, right? They have their own agendas that they're trying to pull, and Shaddam wants a son, and he's only produced daughters, and so he's getting more and more resentful of every daughter, because he's been wanting a son, and he knows what the Bene Gesserit can do. He knows that they can make him a son, but they choose not to. and so that's upsetting him, and that's the most we pretty much get with him in this particular book, anyway. Um, Duncan is about 20 at the start of this book. Jessica gets introduced in this book, or she was in the last book slightly. She was like born, right? But here she's 12 years old, so almost a teenager. And there'll be some time skips in here, so don't get too worried when I talk about certain things in this book. I mean, it's still definitely before, I think, 18, but sci-fi universe that's acts more like the past, so let's not think about it too much. But definitely over the age of 13 when stuff goes down. Not that that makes it any better, but sci-fi, man. Anyway, um, I also learned that Leah Kynes is the same age as Jessica, so that was kind of interesting. Another interesting thing we learned is that Peter de Veers, or whatever Fudge's name is, from Petior, uh, Harkonnen, sorry, the Baron Harkonnen's Mentat is a Talaxu experiment. I don't know if we knew that before, but that's kind of interesting a little bit. Um, the Bene Gesserit get a hold of the stealth technology that the Harkonnens used to attack the Talaxu ships and blame it on the House Atreides from the first book. We also have an 18-month jump. There's several like time jumps in here, but the first big major jump is an 18-month jump in this book anyway. Um, so Kalea, who's been the IX, she was supposed to be the princess of this place, and then all the political stuff went down, and there was a whole revolution. So now they're just, being granted safe haven on, Caladan with the Duke, Leto Atreides. And Leto's had a crush on her for years now. Like, since the first book, he's had a crush on her. And here they finally give in to their desires, and they fall in love, and Leto has her be his first concubine. Which, again, there's stuff I'm going to get into where this book makes decisions where I didn't know if I liked it at first. But again, just like with the Baron Harkonnen's fat fate, I think it actually adds to the story overall. But I'll get to that. So, at first everything's great, but she's a lot different from Jessica. Because as time goes on, as the years go by, Kalea gets upset with Leto because he won't marry her. So, there's that. Hold on, sorry. Sorry about that. A little bit of a distraction. But, because unlike Jessica, who just loves, Leto unabashedly, wholly, Kalea, she was supposed to be queen one day, and she still is technically a princess or whatever, kind of like the whole Leia and Han thing, but she just doesn't. She wants it. She wants that title. She wants that status. And, Leto took to heart what his father told him, don't marry for love, marry, if it's going to give you advantage. But he thinks, like, this should be good enough. I don't need to give you a ring. I've dedicated myself to you. Is that not good enough? But for her, it's not. And that resentment will only continue as the years and months go by. Leto learns of the stealth technology from the Bene Gesserit. They give him that information because he really wants to know, but they only give him that information, and they don't actually give him proof. They just give him the assurance that they're not lying, and that it was, the Harkonnens. But they said stipulation to even letting them know that for certain was that he had to take Jessica. Not necessarily. He said, "I don't need a concubine. I have someone I care about." And Mokeem convinced him not for that. Then don't have her for that, but she could be very useful. This is all we ask if we're going to give you this information. So he eventually capitulates and he accepts Jessica in his home. He keeps her at a far distance. She's like 13, 14 at this point. He keeps her at a far distance, ignores her a lot of the time, tolerates her, allows her to live in the castle or whatever, allows her to, eat, do whatever she wants, but just, he has his woman. And again, the months and years go by, and um, Kalea gets pregnant. She has Duke Leto's first son, Victor Atreides. And now again, at first I was like, where's this going? You know, because depending on what they do with this, this can be really bad, this can be really good. You know, and I'll get to that because I'm still moving forward. But I think it was a really good decision, I'll say. But so Clea's pregnant and she has birth to the kid. She thinks, okay, now I've given him a son. Now, you know, the son, he'll finally, if he accepts the son, then I can finally move up, you know. Um, and he does accept the son. Like, that is his son. He loves his son unabashedly, unashamedly. That is his child. But again, she's just a concubine. And she is so pissed at this. You know, she keeps mulling over this. You know, she gets to the point at some point where she's like, where their relationship is so strained, and the relationship, which was once beautiful, just is constantly fighting and anger, you know. And so this goes on for, you know, months upon months, you know, a couple of years even. And Leto eventually gets into a huge fight with Clea, you know, runs off, and Jessica's there. And Jessica, over all this time, has been slowly building like a friendship. And, you know, she's supposed to be manipulating him so she can have this sex and give birth to the daughter that the Bene Gesserit want. But when she finally gets him to cave and gets him to do the deed with her, she just holds off on doing anything. She doesn't allow herself to get pregnant. But she allows the love moment, the love making to happen. You know, and so they have their on and off relationship, which only strains Clay and everything further. But Clay also has her own side piece, so, you know, everybody's just fricked. Gurney learns about the fate of his sister, which is really bad. I don't even really want to get into it, but Harkonnen suck and are awful, and you understand why Gurney hates them so much. That's all I'll say there. We also get this wonderful moment where Liet yells at his father because he's like, did you even, you know, Pardon Kynes congratulates him on his marriage or whatever, but he's like, do you even care? Right? Because you spent so much time thinking about the future of Arrakis, but what about today? What about the people here? What are you doing this for if not for the people living here? Because you've gotten so focused on your goal, the future, that you're not thinking about the present. And it was just a really good scene between the two of them, and I really enjoyed that. And then we get to the biggest thing that happens in this book. Again, there's a distraction. It's going to be just a moment. I apologize so much. Apologies. We'll finally finish this video. Oh, gosh. We get to the final part of this. The biggest thing here. So, to me anyway. Kalea has been consistently getting more and more upset with Leto. And she gets to the point where she decides to conspire against Leto. If Leto dies, my son will become the sole face of the Atreides line. And then, by virtue of my son, I will again be important. I will again be in power. It just takes getting rid of Leto. Except that her brother, Rombor, who's been best friends with Leto for a long time, decides to bring Victor aboard the ship that Leto's on so he could spend more time with his father, because his father's often busy. And Victor's like 3 or 4 at this point. And Victor finds something that was meant for Leto. And an explosion goes off. Rips Rombor to so many pieces. He's still somehow alive, but he's like, a lot of his body parts have been blown away. And there is no body of Victor, because he's been blown up. Right? He's just gone. So Kalia can't deal with herself because she just murdered her son. Um, and Leto's losing it because he lost his son, who he loved with all of his heart. Right? And so Jessica's trying, and we even get, interesting tidbits. I know the future and stuff that will happen in the universe, but the Talaxu offer to give Leto a gula of Victor. It only takes giving them Rombar because they want revenge on Rombar for some things. And he considers it. He actually considers it. But in the end, he doesn't go through with it. And he's been confiding in Jessica many nights, many days, just talking to her, just building that relationship, that friendship before, I mean, they've been having sex, but like the mental, emotional relationship has been being built and built and built. And Leto's getting kind of better, but he has to kind of get over the fact that his son is just gone. And so he goes away from the castle for a bit to just kind of think through things. But Jessica says, if you're not going to bring an army of guards with you, then you have to take me along. He capitulates, they talk, they enjoy each other's company, and then it becomes one stormy night, and they have one intense night of stuff. But, as they're getting into that, Jessica's like, I love this man. I love him. I'm not supposed to love him, but I've fallen head over heels for this man. And seeing as how she was a part of every moment as he dealt with the grief and loss of his son, so the torment and utter despair that Leto had. And then she decides in that moment when they're having sex, because the Bene Gesserit can do this, I'm giving him a son. And I think, again, now that I've seen it in its full proper context, I love this decision. Because say what you will about these books being weaker than Frank Herbert's work, that adds so much weight and power to the original book. And is that not the entire purpose of a prequel? To add context, to add layers, to add deeper meaning to what already existed. Right? At first I was like, that's why. That's a little unnecessary. But it makes so much sense because instead you go, why is it never mentioned in the original Dune novel? Would you want to bring up your dead kid or just move on and love the new kid you have with all your heart and being and just not think about that? So it makes sense why that's never addressed or brought up. That is fine. But by doing this, by giving him a son before Paul, the significance of Jessica falling in love with him and giving him a son adds so much more weight. Because before it was like, well, yeah, it's the future, but it's like olden times where like all the royalty wants a son, someone to carry on their lineage, to be the next duke or whatever, to be the next emperor, the next king or whatever, right? It was a very like kind of political thing, right? And but Jessica did it because she loved him. But now she was there through his anguish. She was there through his grief. She was there to support him and counsel him during all that pain and suffering that he was going through. And in her love for him, they can't bring back Victor, but she can give him another son. Someone to love dearly and to hold. And it won't erase his previous son, but could at least give him some other form of joy. Something to pour his love into, since you can't give it to Victor. And I'm not a dad. That still hit me like a truck. Like a ton of bricks. And I think if you're a parent, I think that might hit you even harder. And the significance it adds to Paul's life, outside of whatever Paul does himself in the future, just for Leto Atreides' character and what Paul means to him, is so much more impact now that when I reread the original Dune novel by Frank Herbert, and I rewatch that film, there's just a whole new layer of context there with what Paul means to Leto, and what Leto's willing to sacrifice for Paul. And I think that's beautiful. And if there's one thing I can say about this book, I'm absolutely glad that they gave him another son, that they gave him another lover before Jessica. I think with all that context in mind, that it was one of the greatest decisions that Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert came up with. I love this decision wholeheartedly and unabashedly. This was an amazing story decision for a prequel. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So, like I said, while I may have mixed bags on the plot of House Harkonnen as a middle book, I think I have a lot of issues, a lot of middle books, and a lot of middle chapters in the trilogy story. But I absolutely love this particular aspect of the story. Anyway, guys, that's pretty much it. I gotta head off to church, but I hope you're all having a wonderful day. And make sure to walk with rhythm, or the sandworms may eat you. And I'll see you when I review House Carino, the final book in the House trilogy of Dune. Till then.